Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Shtabach Shemo, thank you. Okay, I think we're going to bet. So it says here, that which the Torah we read yesterday, it says Rabbeinu, ממש כתב רבנו, בחשיב נר של שבת ונר של הכנסת כלה, בית הכנסת, שכולם של מצווה. So he says, right, that all these things, Hanukkah, Shabbat, and synagogue, is considered to be candles of mitzvah. So therefore you can light one from the other. וזה לשון בעל התרומה. So it says, right, that this is the language of the בעל התרומה. הלכה כשמואל, the halacha is like Shmuel, he says. דאמר מדליקין מנר לנר, that we can light from one candle to another. דהרבא עביד כבתי, because Rabbi did like him. אם כן, if so, מותר להדליק כנסה או נר של חול מנר של מצווה. So therefore, you're allowed to light even a twig or mundane candle from the candle of the mitzvah. Hen benerot Shabbat, hen benerot Chanuka. Whether it's Shabbat, Chanuka, it's all the same. Hen benerot shel bet knesset or the synagogue. Mutar le'adik kisam miner shel Shabbat. You're allowed to light the twig from the Shabbat candle in order to light the Chanukah candles. Or the opposite. Or להדליק כיסם מנר של Shabbat, or to light a twig from Shabbat candle, כדי להדליק נר אחרת, in order to light another candle של Shabbat, of Shabbat. וכן בנרות חנוכה, same thing with the candles of Hanukkah. אבל נר של חול, but when it comes to a mundane candle, אסור להדליק מנר של מצווה, you're not allowed to light it from a candle of מצווה. אלא אם כן, unless מדליק מאותו נר. Unless he's lighting from that candle, אחרת, that other candle של מצווה, he's lighting from there a candle of מצווה. כי דמוכה ההיא, like it's proven over there, אין שוקלים כנגד מעשר שני. Like it says over there in the Talmud, that we don't weigh against Maser Sheni, Shene Dinare Zahav, 2 gold coins. So why is that? Because again, right, Maser Sheni is a mitzvah thing, right? Maaser. It's tithes, whatever. So that's why you can't use it to weigh the coins. עד כאן לשנות. ורבנו לא חשש להזכיר נר חנוכה. So he says, Rabbeinu, the tour, didn't mention candle of Hanukkah mishum decheban de'ala kaima, because since he's talking about that in any case, mimela mashma, so obviously it implies that techi kama kulam shel mitzvah, that when he said, right, that they're all mitzvah, שיכול להדליק מזה לזה, you can light from one to the other. דהנר חנוכה נמי. He's also talking about Hanukkah, obviously. So that's the reason why I didn't mention it, because it was already redundant and obvious. Okay. That's the story. So,
Shmuel, I'm sorry to ask a little bit tardy on this.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Who was Shmuel? Obviously somebody from the Gemara, but who was his teacher?
Oh, okay, good question. So we're talking about here Rav and Shmuel, right? So these were two contemporaries, and they were friends and they argued with each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the two leading rabbis of that generation, They both studied from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was their rabbi, and he was the last generation of Tanaim, and they were the first generation of Emoraim. So it like at that generation it flipped over into a different different period. That's who Rav and Shmuel were. So these were like the great rabbis of that generation. They and Shmuel was also he was a doctor, and he was an astronomer as well. He knew a lot of things. He had lots of wisdom. He was like the Rambam of that generation, something like that, right? Yeah, that's how he was. Okay, so anyway, that's the Bet Yosef. There's also here another piece which I want to cover. It says here, Katuba Trumat Edition. It says Trumat Edition, even according to one who says that we light from candle to candle, by way of a twig, but if there's concern that the twig will get extinguished, and then therefore he will never come to actually use it to light the holy candle, beruach, right, with the wind, let's say, right, so then he would admit, right, that it's forbidden. So in a case like that, right, he's saying, right, that there's no permission to do that, where there's concern that the twig will go out, which is the intermediary between the two holy candles. We already mentioned this in the Shulchan Aruch yesterday, but I just read here the Bet Yosef that was in the bottom there. I didn't get a chance to see it, so reading it now just to remind you. Okay, so now let's go to Shulchan Aruch Bet and see what we have there. Yeah, Bet Yosef is finished. That's it. So we just got to see a Shulchan Aruch. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, Yesh mi she'omer. There is one that says, Shener shel Bet HaKnesset, that the candle of the synagogue, v'shel Shabbat, and also Shabbat, v'shel Chanuka, and also Chanuka, these are all mitzvot, kulam shel mitzvah hen, u'mutar le'adik ze mizeh. So therefore, since they're all mitzvot, you're allowed to light one from the other. So says the Ramah here, ve'hu adin ner shel Talmud Torah. Same thing he says also would apply to a candle that is used for Torah study, or ner lechole, or for a sick person. הצריך ner, that he needs a candle. ובעניין נר של בית הכנסת, so it says regarding the candle of the synagogue, look over above, it says there's also another discussion there somewhere. But basically that's the story here. These are all mitzvot. So the Rama also adds, if you're using a candle for Torah study, that's also considered to be mitzvah. Okay, so we're done with this chapter. Let's go to the next one. So it says here the Torah, something we already discussed before, but Hilchata Adlakat Oseh Mitzvah, right? The halacha is the lighting is the mitzvah. In other words, when you light it, that's when you're doing the mitzvah. Velo hanacha, and not when you place it. When you place it, that's not the mitzvah. When you light it, that's the mitzvah. Ve'eshim hayta munachat bekoma shelo l'shem mitzvah bimkoma. So it says if it was placed in somewhere and it wasn't done for the mitzvah, wasn't placed there for the mitzvah, right? Mitzvah Chanuka, for the Chanuka, madlika sham, you can still light it there. Why? Because we don't care why you placed it there. The question is, when you light it, you have to have in mind the mitzvah. So he adds to that, you don't have to remove it and put it back, as if like to place it again for the mitzvah. לשם המצווה, וחנוכה, מצוות חנוכה. הילקח הששית שהייתה דולקת כל היום, so he says, therefore, if you have a lantern, right, that was lit, lighting all day, לערב, what do you do? In the evening, you can mechaba, you can put it out. ומדליקה לשם מצווה, and then you can light it for the mitzvah. You don't have to replace it, do another placement. בכל מקום צריך שידליקנה במקום הנחתה. Okay, that's a very different story. We'll first see the Bet Yosef. So it says the Bet Yosef here. הלכתה הדלקה עושה מצווה ולא הנחה. Right, as we said, right, the lighting is the mitzvah and not the placing, the placement. Hachi asikna begemara. That's the conclusion of the Gemara. B'amim madlikin over there, as we said, in Shabbat, right? Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. Umash katav hilkach asashit, and therefore that what she wrote regarding the lantern, right? It's also over there. Sham Chaf Bet Amud Bet. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. This rabbi says, ashashit shayta doleket veolechet kol hayom. If you have a lantern, right, that was going all day, kol hayom kulo lemotzei Shabbat mechaba umadlika. So what do you do? Put it out, after Shabbat goes out, and then relight it, right, for Chanuka. Rashi says, Sheidalika lemitzvat Chanuka. He lit it for Chanuka, Erev Shabbat, for Erev Shabbat. Erev Shabbat, he lit before. Lemotzi Shabbat, and then goes until the end of Shabbat. Tzarich lechabota. So then you have to put it out when Shabbat goes out. Ladika lemitzvat halayla. And then to light it again for the next night, right? For Motzi Shabbat. Then he goes on. But you do have to light it in the place where you placed it. What does that mean? Klomar, so it says Bet Yosef, it means Af agdav de en hanacha ose mitzvah, even though placing is not a mitzvah, mikom makom, nevertheless, tzarich sheadlikena b'makom hanachata. You'd have to light it in the place where it's placed. Kedita b'hatam, like it says over there in the Gemara, Chapet Amud Bet. Amar Rava, hadlaka hidlika bifnim beotzia. If he lit it inside and took it out, lo asa klum, didn't do nothing. So what does that mean? After he lit it, he moved it. You're not allowed to do that. So you lose the mitzvah like that. That's the problem, right? Because the one who sees that is going to say, "Oh, he lit that for his own needs. It wasn't for the mitzvah." Rava says also there, "Hayat tafus ner Chanuka lo asa klum." So what does that mean? Right? He was holding the Chanukah candle. He didn't do nothing. Why? Because people are going to think, oh, he lit it for his own needs. He needs a lantern. He needs like a flashlight. That's why he lit it. So he says, Matzati Katuv, I found written B'Shem Mahari Avuhav. In the name of this rabbi, Zal, Katab B'Nimuki Yosef, that says in this rabbi, Ki Pam Echad Ra'a Bet HaKnesset, one time he saw in the synagogue, Sheidliku Hanerot B'Kli, Shayu Madlikim Kol Hashana. They lit the candles in a utensil they were using all year, Lia'ir, to give light, Shebeotokli, in that utensil. Hayu Nerot Metukanot Lener Chanuka. So now you have Chanukah candles there, placed there. Ve'achar sheidlika amadlik ner Chanukah, and then after, right, the person lit the Chanukah candles. Hayam molich achevel biado. So then he was pulling a rope in his hands, yagbia kli, to lift up the kli, the utensil, le'amida bimkomo, to place it in its place, which is designated for it. Kol hashana, all year. Umicha biad amadik, and he objected against this, right? This rabbi, he didn't like that. Shelo yaseh ken, they shouldn't do that. She'afa pi sheshamu ha'omdim bebet HaKnesset, that even though the people who are standing in the synagogue, they heard habracha, the blessing shel Chanuka, of the Chanuka, b'shat hadlaka, in the time of the lighting, b'kol makom haro'eh shelo haya sham be'oto sha'a, be'ota sha'a. So it says, but in any case, a person that was not there at that time, Yomar, he will say, he will get a mistaken notion that Srokohu Shidliko, he lit it for his own needs. Therefore, he says, Tziva shelo yagbienu, that's why he commanded not to lift it up. Ela she'anichenu lemata bepachot mi'asara. You should place it below, under 10 tvachim. Ve'amar she'adayin yesh lefakpek al zeh. So he says, there's still some objection against this. Why is that? Because they're still using the light. And since they're doing that all year, using the light over there in that place, even though it's not in its place, since there's no other candle in the place of the Ner Chanukah, so therefore the people who are standing there are also going to use it for their own needs. In place of the candle. Because that's the way they're accustomed to do. For Chanukah, so therefore he says the proper thing to do is to use a different utensil, right? So in other words, like what that would say to us is like, for our purposes, is that, you should try, to for your Hanukkah candle needs, to have a special menorah for Hanukkah, and not to use like, something that you use on a daily basis. Because otherwise people will get confused and, think that this is just a, normal candle. ונראה לי שמאחר שהדלקת בבית הכנסת נר כנסת אינו אלא משום מנהג So he says, it seems to me, says Bet Yosef, that since lighting the candle in the shul is really just a custom, shinahagu, right? It's not really something, a real mitzvah. That's what he's trying to say. And we're not really concerned that it should be right in front of the door, in front of the entrance. Rather, we put it in front of the ark. And we're not really so concerned about it so much, because people who come in and out, we're not really concerned so much about the people who are coming in and out. So he says also another thing, which is that at home we also light, and nowadays we're only lighting for the people in the house. Right? In other words, we're lighting indoors. So therefore, we're not really so concerned about the people who are passers-by so much. All the more so in the synagogue. Because everybody who comes there, everybody knows it's Chanukah candles. So another thing is, it seems to say and since he already lit them in a place which is not fitting, it's like he went out, that he's not really obligated to light anymore. That's the end of it. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Not this one, we already did this one. Okay, so it says in Shulchan Aruch, Adlaka also mitzvah, right? So, as we said, right, that the mitzvah is done by lighting, right? And not the placement. The placement is not the mitzvah. So, if it was placed in its place, mitzvah, not for the sake of the mitzvah of Chanuka, right? The mitzvah Chanuka, madlika sham, you can still light it there, right? Even though we didn't place it for the mitzvah, the placement is not the crucial thing. So he says, therefore, ashashit shehayta doleket kol hayom. If you have a lantern that was lit all day, like some kind of a lamp, whatever, sheidlika me'erev Shabbat. He lit that erev Shabbat, the mitzvah Chanukah. He lit it for Chanukah. So in other words, he lit it on Friday for Chanukah, and it went all Shabbat. It was he put a lot of oil in there, whatever, right? So this it's burning all Shabbat, and now, right? He wants to relight it. He wants to redo the mitzvah for Motzi Shabbat, for after Shabbat. So what do you do? Motzi Shabbat mechaba madlika l'shem mitzvah. All you got to do is put it out and relight it again, for the mitzvah. So what does that mean? You don't need to move the menorah or something like that to replace it. But the placement is not crucial, as we said. Okay, so he goes on in the Shulchan Aruch here. But as we already said in the Bet Yosef, right, you do have to be careful that once you lit it, don't move it around, right? You can't do that. Because if he lit it inside, right, indoors, let's say, and then he took it outdoors, lo yatzah, he didn't fulfill his obligation. Why is that? What's the reason why? Because people are going to think, oh, he's lighting that for his own needs, because he's using it like a flashlight. Right, so what are we saying over here, right? You got to be careful. Once you light the menorah, don't move it around, because otherwise you didn't fulfill your obligation. Because it creates a mistaken notion. What's a mistaken notion? That you lit it for your own needs, not for Hanukkah. This is the problem. Okay, good. So then he says, right? וכן אם מדליקה ואוחזו בידו ממקומה, לא יצא, שהרואה אומר לצורך רוח חוזה. Another problem is like this, right? Don't light the Hanukkah, candles when you're holding them in your hand. You shouldn't do that. Why is that? Because if you do it that way, same problem, right? That people are going to think you're doing it for your own needs. You need some light somewhere, so you're turning it on as a flashlight, whatever it is, right? So what's the proper thing to do in order to avoid this? Right? Two things, right? Once you light the Hanukkah candles, don't move them, right? That's one thing. And also another thing, which is that don't light the Hanukkah candles when you're holding them in your hand. So what should you be holding in your hand? The matches, right? To light the Hanukkah candles, right? Or whatever, right? Or some little wick, whatever, to light the Hanukkah candles. But the Hanukkah candles themselves, don't hold them, That's what I'm trying to say. But if you're holding the shamash, that's okay. We're not worried about that. Because the shamash is not the Hanukkah candles, right? It's just for usage, right? For practical purposes, to protect from using the light or whatever it is, right? So therefore, there's no issue with that. So if you use a shamash, it's okay in your hands, whatever. But the Hanukkah candles themselves, you shouldn't be holding them in your hands when you light them. Okay, very good. Let's see what else we got here. So I'll read in the Torah a little bit. So another thing that the Torah says over here, important thing, we already discussed this before, but that's what it is. So he says, since we already established, right, that the main mitzvah is when you light it, that's the main thing. So therefore, you have to have enough oil when you light it that it should light for a half hour, right? Because as we said, half hour is the mitzvah. So if you don't have enough oil in there for a half hour, when you light it, you got a problem because right, it doesn't have the potential to burn for a half hour. So therefore, you got to make sure, right, you put enough oil in there, whatever, right? Or if you're using the paraffin, whatever, right? Those are good because they burn more than a half hour, so it's fine, Right? The Hanukkah candles, the paraffin. Right, that's also fine, But if you're using oil, which is the best way to do it, as we said, olive oil. So then you got to make sure you got enough oil in there, right? Usually it's enough. I mean, it's not really a lot. You don't need a lot for a half hour. It's just like maybe like 1 ounce, of oil. I don't know, whatever. It's very small. Even maybe even a half an ounce. I don't know exactly how much it is, but it's a very small amount. So it's not really a big deal. Maybe even a quarter of an ounce. I don't know exactly how much it is, whatever it is. It's definitely much less than an ounce. That's for sure. You know from experience, right? If you do it every year, you know how much it is. You know what it takes. But what I did notice, by the way, this year is that I bought some new cups and wicks. For this year, I usually buy new ones every year because I don't want to deal with cleaning them and stuff. Whatever. So what do you call it? I lit them, and I was doing like trial and error because I never used these before. Like they're the ones that the wicks are like long, and they go into this like little shaft, and you place them there, and they burn like that, right? It's like you place them in the shaft. So one thing I did notice though, is that even though I like, the cups are quite large, I mean, relatively speaking. So I knew that it didn't really need much to burn for a half hour, So I put like, let's say, a quarter in there, right? A quarter of the cup, the size of the cup. And I thought that would be enough, and it was. But here's the thing, right? That even though it is enough to put a quarter, but what I noticed, something is that they don't burn well like that, they don't have a bright, light like that. So if you want to get a nice, bright, big flame, with these types of, these candles, what you have to do is fill them up till the top. And then, the flame comes out nice and strong and bright. So, and then what I do is I put it out, after half hour, whatever it is, right? Half hour is enough, as we said. So I put it out, and the rest gets left over for the next day. So now, tonight was the last night, right? So, we don't have a next day anymore, right? So, if the candle already burned for a half hour and you put it out, the truth is, the rest of the oil which is left over there, you could put it back into the bottle and use it for other uses, as long as it didn't get damaged. Whatever you think, right? If you're disgusted by it, so then throw it away. What can we do, right? But if it's nice and clean, and you want to put it back into the bottle, you could. Because once it burned for a half hour, the rest of it is mundane. So you're allowed to use it for mundane purposes, to make a salad or, to fry latkes or whatever you want to do with it, right? Whatever it is you want to do. It's all good, right? So that's the way it is. So again, right, I wanted to point that out that even though you don't really need a lot of oil, in terms of the timing, but in terms of the brightness of the light, I noticed that, filling it up makes it really much brighter and better. So, right, take it for what it is. Okay. So says the Torah, right? "Aval lo yadlik veitin shemen achar." So what you shouldn't do, is first light it and then put oil in there, that we don't want. Right? In other words, you don't have enough oil, and then all of a sudden, right after you light it, you put it in. That's already too late because the lighting is the mitzvah. So therefore, you got to make sure that before you light it, you have enough oil in there. V'lo yidlikena acheres shotev katan. Right? Okay, that's already something else. Let's see the Bet Yosef here. So it says Bet Yosef regarding this. V'chen katav Rosh. That's what it says also in the Rosh. The perek bamed madlikin over there in this perek, and that's in Shabbat. V'zeh leshano kevan she'adlaka osa mitzvah. So he says, since lighting is the mitzvah, tzarich she'iten shemen bener kadeh shiur kodem adlaka. So you got to make sure you put the oil in there before you light, right? Enough for a half hour. Aval im berach ve'idlik, but if he blessed and then he lit it, ve'chakach usaf shemen, and then he added the oil, ad kadeh shiur, enough to go for a half hour. Lo yatzeh techova chovato. He didn't fulfill his obligation. So the Rosh tells you, right? You didn't fulfill your obligation if you did it that way. So be careful, don't play games. Okay, very good. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So it says here, Yesh Mishi Omer. There is one that says, Techiman de adlaka osa mitzvah, that since lighting is the mitzvah, tzarich sheiten shemen bener, you have to put enough oil in there, right, in the candle, kadesh shiur, right, for the half hour. Kodem hadlaka, before lighting. Avalim berach beidlik, but if he blessed and then he lit, v'chakach osif shemen ad kadesh shiur, and then he added the oil for a half hour, lo yitzai dechobato, he didn't fulfill his obligation, right? So therefore, a person should be careful about that, not to fall into that mistake. Okay, thanks for coming tonight. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Shabbat shalom. Chanuka sameach. Tonight is the last night. Tomorrow is the last day. B'ezrat Hashem. Our soldiers should be victorious, and lots of miracles should occur for them. as already have been, right? And they should be, Bezat Hashem, victorious over our enemies, and right, we should wipe all of them out, and Mashiach, Bezat Hashem, will come and redeem us from this long 2,000-year exile. Amen ve'amen.
Amen. Kavod ha'av. Thank you so much, Shabbat Shalom.
Umvorach. All the best.
Thank you.